From a personal point of view, Australia has always been a very special place to me, even though we are on opposite sides of the world. I spent many years in the Royal Navy and was fortunate enough to visit Australia on several occasions, working alongside both the Australian and New Zealand navies. Time spent in places like Perth and Sydney, and I have to admit, a few hangovers shared with my Australian counterparts, is something I will never forget. There were even times when I seriously considered making the move myself and starting a new life there. At that time, it was seen as a very attractive future. That is why, when I first discovered the reality of United Kingdom state pension freezes, I was both surprised and concerned. The idea that people who had been encouraged to make that move, people who had worked, contributed, and built their lives, could now be facing financial difficulty in later years, was something I found hard to ignore. In recent months, I have spent a great deal of time looking into how this situation has developed and how it has come to affect over 500,000 people around the world. In this video, I would like to share some of that understanding and also look at what I believe are the only realistic ways this issue could be addressed. To understand why UK pensions are frozen in Australia today, we need to look briefly at how the system developed. After the Second World War, large numbers of people moved from the United Kingdom to Australia, many under government-supported schemes. At the time, the focus was on building a new life and supporting a growing country. Very little attention was given to how pensions would be treated decades later. The United Kingdom and Australia did enter into a social security agreement. This allowed people to combine contribution records so they could qualify for a pension. However, that agreement did not include annual increases to the UK state pension for those living in Australia. As a result, pensions paid to UK retirees in Australia were effectively frozen at the level they were when first paid. In later years, a revised agreement was introduced, but this also did not include pension uprating. Australia eventually ended that agreement, largely due to differences over cost and how each country structured its pension system. But it is important to understand this point clearly. The ending of the agreement did not cause pensions to be frozen. They were already frozen long before that. What we are seeing today is the continuation of a policy that has existed for many decades, shaped by agreements that never included pension increases and decisions made later not to extend them. So the situation we see today is not the result of one single decision, but a series of policies and agreements over time, which together have left many UK pensioners in Australia with frozen pensions. So this problem is extensive. There are over 1 million UK pensioners living overseas, and roughly half of them receive annual increases, while the other half, around 500,000 people, do not. There is evidence that, prior to 1981, the UK government had been working towards expanding reciprocal agreements that could have addressed this imbalance. However, in the early 1980s, a decision was taken to limit further agreements. At that time, there were significant economic pressures, and controlling government spending became a priority. As a result, the system we see today was effectively set in place, and it is difficult to avoid the conclusion that as it stands, the system is inconsistent and for many unfair. So what are the possible options? The first option is to do nothing, to maintain the current system and keep the status quo. The second option would be to cancel or amend existing reciprocal agreements. While this might reduce long-term costs for the UK Treasury, it would create new inequalities and would likely be politically and socially unacceptable. The third option would be to extend pension increases more widely, bringing more countries into a system where pensions are uprated over time. But this third option comes at a cost, and at a time when the UK government is facing significant financial pressures, including rising public spending, global economic uncertainty, and competing priorities, any large new commitment would need to be carefully considered. As we have said, more than 500,000 pensioners are affected by frozen UK pensions, and many would argue that they are being treated unfairly. So the question becomes, realistically, what could the UK government do in this situation? Having looked into this in some detail, I understand that the majority view is quite simple. Treat everyone the same and provide full pension increases to all. In principle, that would create equality. But in reality, it is likely to be financially very difficult to achieve in one step. That is why I believe any solution would need to be introduced gradually. One possible approach would be to introduce increases in stages. This could be done by location, but perhaps a fairer and more consistent method would be to base it on age groups. For example, it could begin with pensioners aged 75 and over, then extend to those aged 70 and above, and finally include all remaining pensioners. This type of phased approach would allow costs to be controlled and planned over time. It would also bring all affected pensioners into a single system eventually, removing the current situation where outcomes depend on the country in which someone lives. There is one further aspect that is worth considering. Not all pensioners are affected in the same way. Some people have additional income from private pensions, savings or investments, and while they may feel the system is unfair, they are able to manage. Others, however, may be much more dependent on their UK state pension and could be experiencing genuine financial hardship. It would be helpful to better understand how many people fall into that category. Perhaps the Department for Work and Pensions could carry out a survey to assess the level of financial need among those affected. That information could then be used to help prioritise support for those in the most difficult circumstances. That is just one possible approach, but it highlights that there may be ways to refine the solution further. I would also be very interested in hearing directly from pensioners who are experiencing real hardship as a result of frozen pensions. If you are affected or know someone who is, you are welcome to share your experience. You can contact me at lifeafter60rzohomail.com or leave a comment below. Many thanks for watching, and if you found this video helpful, please consider sharing it to help raise awareness of this issue.